Vasudevaya. So we'll continue from where we stopped yesterday regarding the topic of mind your mind. But before we go ahead, I want to know if yesterday whatever we discussed in the 2 hours of the class, was there any point that struck some chord, deep chord within you, and you feel that if you apply that, you strongly feel your life could change for better? Is there one point that really touched your heart in some way? Phone. Be careful of the phone. That was one point. Thank you, Prabhu. Free writing, yes. Yes. 3 stages of gratitude. What are they? Yeah. I to he or she, to him, the Lord, the Supreme Lord. Thank you for that. Anything else? Yes. Just 1 second. We'll. Mindfulness. Observe more and judge less. Thank you. Same thing. Thank you. Morning hours are the game changers. So if you can get up early in the morning, we can see. I'm not asking for memory recall. I'm asking for something that makes that you feel it can change your life for the best. Thank you for your encouraging words. So today we'll talk about acceptance. Yesterday we discussed it in little bit. So these are some of the topics we discussed so far in our series: introduction and awareness, and now we are in the middle of acceptance. And anybody remembers the example I gave, the first example I gave of what acceptance does to you? When we practice acceptance, how is it like? What happens to our life? Remember this? That you are locked in a room or a closet and how you feel choked up, and if somebody releases you, that's how you feel when we start practicing acceptance. And acceptance is the key of relationships. I was sharing different examples of our inability to accept others and accept ourselves for the way we are causes a lot of tension in our relationships. And I also said how it's difficult to explain acceptance because it's not a cognitive process, it's more of the heart. So therefore we need to be involved, and it's counterintuitive. It appears as if that, if I accept my misery, I'll never improve or I'll never become better. But actually it's opposite. When I accept my situation, we can actually make progress. You remember what example I gave for acceptance, how acceptance makes our life less miserable than what it would eventually be in life? Yes, Riya Mataji? Dragger, yeah. Correct. Somebody shoots an arrow, that is painful, right? But if we start lamenting, what does Buddha say? If we start lamenting about that arrow, then we have invited a second arrow to hit us. If somebody hits us with a dragger in the stomach, but then if we start moving the dragger, it's more painful. So pain we cannot avoid, but suffering we can reduce suffering. But if you want to go from one place to another place, you may need GPS, and you can immediately go from place A to place B. But in our emotional world, if you want to go from emotion 1, anger, to emotion 2, peace, we can't directly go with the help of some techniques. We need to first pause and accept where I am. Just like if you are lost and you call up your friend for directions to come to his house, the first question he'll ask you is, where are you right now? And if you say, I don't know, he won't be able to help you to come there. Similarly, we want to attain some state, but if you don't know where we are right now and if you can't come to terms with it, then it will be difficult. I gave the example of a boss who cheats on you, or in the sense who takes your promotion, he takes your research work, and he pulls you down. And then if you keep lamenting, why he did this to me, you're not actually going to improve your situation. You can't say, it should not have happened, but it has happened. So acceptance is the first step, and we should avoid horribilizing situations and stop crying more than what the situation is. We gave examples from Srimad Bhagavatam, if you remember. The three examples we discussed were Brahmaji, Chitraketu Maharaj, and Mohini, Lord Shiva's example. Now we will enter into this skills or some of the things that we could actually do by which we can improve our acceptance of ourselves. So now these 6 sub-principles or tools, the way you see it, this can improve our acceptance of ourselves and of others, and in the process, when our acceptance is better, what will happen? What is the main topic? When I can accept myself better, I can live peacefully with my mind. Remember, we are discussing the 3 principles by which we can transform a vicious enemy, which is the mind, to a lifelong friend. For that, we need to practice, along with awareness, we need to practice acceptance. And there are 6 ways you will learn today, at least 2 or 3 we will learn for sure, on how you can improve your acceptance. And the first is called authenticity. This is my favorite topic. Being authentic, being genuine, inside, outside, same. And see the difference it makes to your life. Actually, this is an amazing subject matter. Now, I'm not saying you should go around and tell everyone all the dirty things that are there in your heart in order to be authentic. That's not the point. The point is, we should be true to ourselves. Like I remember, I was in Europe this last month, and there was one particular program I was doing for all school principals. They were all Afro-British, British, Europeans. They were not Hare Krishna, some from Turkey. That 80% of them were non-Hare Krishnas, and 20% of the Hare Krishnas were organizing the event. So it was interesting, all of them were sitting. For them, a monk is a unique species. They've never seen a tilak like this. So there was a question, there was one interview session where the devotees were organizing the event. They were asking me questions. They were trying to make it little lively and interactive. And one Afro-British lady from middle of the crowd, she raised her hand and she asked, it was impromptu question answers, it was not scripted. So this lady asked a question. What is the biggest challenge of being a monk? So immediately, I didn't plan the answer. Immediately I said, to live without a companion, that's a big challenge. So she was stunned. She immediately said, oh, I've never heard this answer. I said, oh, now you're hearing it. But then she said, can you elaborate? So then we had a long discussion. And everyone, even I was feeling so happy being candid. And the struggles of, there is struggle in Grihastha Ashram also. Like yesterday I was coming, I had gone for a walk in the rains. I was so happy. I came down. And one Grihastha met me at the gate. He said, Prabhuji, बहुत खुश लग रहे. मैं कहा बारिश में मजा आता है, बारिश आता तो मजा आता है. Then he said, Prabhuji, but बहुत ज़्यादा बारिश रहेगा. By the end of the rainy season, we feel choked up. He said, rainy season, rain is like married life, he said. शुरू में मजा आता है, he gave an example. He said, शुरू में मजा आता है, बाद में किच 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 होता है. I found it so hilarious. So, there is challenges. So, but you will see generally in the renounced order, we'll never say that it is difficult. We'll always see us explain about the glories of renounced order, and that makes the people who interact with the renounced order people, it makes them see them as superhuman. And that adds a lot of pressure. So I want to be normal. So this is what I was sharing with them, and they were so fascinated because the first lecture I gave to them, they were all sleeping in the class. When this particular session happened, after that, everyone was always awake. And so many people met me, and then I was thinking, I came back to my room and I was writing my journals in the morning, and I was wondering why everybody is happy, why I am happy. And then I realized somewhere we connected to each other. We were just being authentic. So this is a very important point. All of us need to be honest. At least with ourselves. We don't have to go around telling everyone, about our struggles, about the details, and all that is not needed. But being authentic is extremely important. That which is denied cannot be healed. So if you always say, no, I'm good, Nothing is wrong with me. I was hearing today morning Srila Prabhupada's class. Srila Prabhupada gave the example of acceptance. It was a coincidence. Srila Prabhupada is saying, so we are many times living like the rabbit. The rabbit, he is hearing the roar of a lion and he knows the lion is nearby. And to avoid the lion, the rabbit starts digging the ground and hiding his head, thinking that the lion won't see me. Like in English we say, ostrich head in the sand approach. So when there is a problem in our life, we need to accept it and be authentic, at least with a few people, and come to terms with it. But what we generally do is, we deny. No, everything is good. Yeah, everything is. No, material world is a miserable place. Dukkhalaya mashachatam. Let us accept it. But you will see most of the self-help gurus, they always talk about life is cool, be positive. Yes, we have to be positive. But life is harsh. It's miserable. Like I knew one person who was a chain smoker. Practically, he was an addict. He used to smoke 30 cigarettes a day. That's a lot, right? 30 cigarettes. So I told him, you should do something about it, don't you think? He was my college friend. So he said, oh, I'm not addicted. Come on. I can give it up anytime I want. It's so easy for me. After that, why don't you give it up? I said, I just don't feel like, But I can give up any moment. It's not a big deal. Cigarette kya hai? Kuch bhi nahi hai. And the way he was talking so convincingly sounded very impressive externally. But to me, I knew he's in denial. If he says, I am addicted, I need help, there is a chance that he could get help. But what happens is, when we are in denial, we refuse to recognize the truth. And when we refuse to recognize the truth, and it doesn't feel like denial, especially when you are the one doing it. You will never feel it's a denial, because you are the one who is saying, oh, I'm not addicted, I can give it up. When others do that to you, you can immediately recognize it is in denial. There is a very famous man, Charles Johnson. He was a simple airplane mechanic in San Francisco. He founded, like Srila Prabhupada formed International Society for Krishna Consciousness. He formed International Society for Flat Earth. So his mission was to prove to the world that the earth is flat. And believe it or not, his preaching was so powerful that 3,500 he had 3,500 disciples, students. And it became a big movement in America. So then he would be called on all these television interviews where they would show him NASA images, all different proofs how earth is not flat. And he would deny all of it with full confidence. No logic. Oh, earth is flat. Oh, these are all. And the only argument he kept giving was, this is all a conspiracy by NASA, by American government, by all the world, to discredit the Bible, to discredit all of us. This is all a hoax. But this evidence, oh, this is a conspiracy. For everything, he was saying it's a conspiracy. This is a classic case of denial. No. I don't want to accept. And it is said that of all the lies we speak, denial is the worst. Because that is the lie we speak to ourselves. When we lie to ourselves, that is the most debilitating. So therefore, we have to be careful. Srila Prabhupada once gave this story of one thief who tried to steal a golden bell from the temple. It was a huge golden bell. But when he went near, he knew that if he touches it, it will create a big sound. So what did he do? He put cotton in his own ears. So you think that will help? No. So denial is not going to help. Therefore, let us now slowly start practicing authenticity, just being congruent inside, outside. See, many times what happens is, our inside is different, our outside is different. You accept that? Now, I'll give an example. I was managing one small base where some boys were staying. And there was a festival we organized, boys, girls, they all came. And I was overseeing the whole thing, but I was not involved in management, but I was overseeing, I was in charge of that base. So there was one boy, I knew he liked sweets. So we had made sweet rice and we were serving. But he was not eating. He did, I don't want. And the way he said it, sweet rice nahi chahiye. So I was surprised. And there are other girls also, boys also. So I immediately judged. I should not have judged, but I judged, he's trying to impress the girls that I am sense controller, I don't eat all this. And he was always talking about all big things, about, a vegan diet and all. I was surprised. Kya badi badi baatein kar raha hai? And then I only took the sweet rice in the second round. I said, Prabhu, little sweet rice. No, Prabhu, I have given up all the sweets. Very impressive. So I was impressed. And then what happened at night, then the program got over, we cleaned up the place. Then at night, I went to sleep. And at 1:32, I got up to go to the washroom. So when I got up, I suddenly heard some sound. I was inside the washroom. I opened the door and I saw this boy was opening the refrigerator and eating the sweet rice, which was kept, the remaining sweet rice which I had kept in the refrigerator. And he was eating it nicely because everybody else was asleep. So then I didn't disturb him because poor fellow, he'll पेट पे लात नहीं मारना चाहिए ना किसी का. So after the whole thing, I went out and I didn't make an issue of it. But later on, I reflected in my own life, if my inside is not the same as outside, one day 100% the inside will take revenge. The inside will take revenge. You can't keep in denial. You can't keep saying no, 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 no. Like brahmacharis were going on a yatra once. And we have one brahmachari who is very gentle, soft, speaks very sweet, polite. That bus in Vrindavan, we were going to many places, and the whole day we were traveling. It was tiring, exhausting. And the last ride to that ashram where we were staying was a long one, and the long winding roads, the dusty roads of Vrindavan. Everybody was hungry, exhausted, tired. We all went to sleep. And suddenly the driver, he met with a small accident. He put brakes, and suddenly everybody was jolted. And this fellow got up and started hurling abuses at the driver, left, right, and center. And after 2 minutes, he suddenly realized what he had done. And he looked very sheepishly at all of us. Sorry, Prabhuji. We said, no, you are saying sorry. We are thanking you for our entertainment, We never thought he had this hidden talent. And then he apologized. And then, of course, it was not an issue. But then we realized how, we have many masks. So, if you see Srila Prabhupada was inside, outside, same. Have you ever seen Srila Prabhupada give any lecture where he has notes, all the notes in front of him he has to? See, I'm not saying we should not have notes. That is a sign of sincerity, actually. This is a service given to you. So we prepare our lectures because people are coming from far. So we need to prepare and we need to, that's good. So I'm not discounting the importance of making notes and giving prepared classes. But I'm just saying, Srila Prabhupada would never need notes because he spoke on the Vyasasana, on the seat. He would speak the same thing that he would speak of the Vyasasana. Isn't it? Because what he thought and what he spoke, what he felt was all same. In our lives, we think one thing, we feel second thing, we speak third thing, we do fourth thing. So that's why we need a lot of notes, a lot of reminders. So it's important. Actually, Bhagavad Gita begins with this principle. Dhritarashtra always kept saying that Pandavas and Kauravas are equal to me. They are my sons only, my children only. They're all same to me, same to me. But the first verse of the Gita, he says, Mamaka Pandavas Cheva. Oh, what is happening between my sons and the Pandavas? Immediately, his inner bias and prejudice was exposed for all time to come. So, one has to be careful. In Akbar's palace, one man came and he said, I am an expert linguist. I can speak 25 languages fluently. I challenge this court. Can anyone guess my mother tongue? And he'll have to give me proof how this is my mother tongue. So then somebody asked questions in Persian, Gujarati, Marathi. Every language he spoke fluently. So nobody could say conclusively what is his mother tongue. Birbal said, I will tell you, but I'll tell tomorrow morning. So he sent his trusted man behind this fellow. And it was, Agra, it's very cold in the winter. So at midnight, this servant of Birbal took a bucket of cold water and threw it on him. And immediately started giving gali and shouting in his mother tongue. I wanted to say Bengali or Gujarati, but I don't want to. So he said something. And immediately the servant noted. And next day Birbal said, his mother tongue is this. Because in the provocative situation, our inside comes out. So if we live more and more in congruence with our inside, and even if we don't, we need to have social etiquette and all that, I admit. But at least with ourselves, at least in our own private moment, at least in your journals, at least with a trusted friend or trusted relative. So that helps. When we are more authentic, then you will see that acceptance becomes easy. Accepting the reversals of life becomes easy. You can take it in a positive, you can take it positively. But unfortunately, most of us, we suffer from one phenomenon called denial. And because of that, we always keep hoping for things that will never happen. And Buddha taught this example in a very beautiful way to one lady. One lady came to him and she asked him that, she was bereaved. Her son had died. And she desperately wanted Buddha to perform a miracle and bring him back to life. And do you know what Buddha told her? Anybody knows what Buddha told her? Yes. Buddha told her that you please get... what he did was, he said, he deferred it to a later time. He said, I'll bring your son back to life. But can you first get me some rice from the neighborhood, from some house? But please see that there has been no death in that family, death in that house. So she rushed because she was so desperate to get her son back to life. The first house she went, they said, they gave rice. And they said, but we lost our elder 3 years ago. Somebody died in the family. So each house she went, she got the rice, but nobody could tell her that there has been no death in our family. So then what happened? She came back, and by the time she went to 10, 15 houses, slowly she realized that death is a great equalizer. It's all pervading. So you see how Buddha taught her acceptance. He taught her acceptance with compassion. Kindly he taught her. So when we get bad news by the doctor, you have cancer, or you have some scary news, we immediately get upset with the doctor. And we may do many, many alternative things. At some point of time, somewhere, we may have to come to terms with it. Because once we accept something, we have a good chance of going beyond it. Now, I'll repeat what I said yesterday. Acceptance is not resigning yourself to your fate. Yesterday I mentioned how if there has been some injustice, there has been some abuse, it's not that you accept it. We explained very clearly yesterday that we are talking about the second arrow. We are talking about the stories that we tell ourselves. So, the whole idea is acceptance helps us to quietly move forward in life with grace and dignity. And even if it is fighting for justice, we can do it. So there is a difference between justice and revenge. Justice is always needed in all situations. Pandavas fought for justice. Revenge is very destructive. And there is a very beautiful story in the Mahabharata which explains this. The need to be authentic. Now, Karna. Now, I don't want to get into Karna's character. Now, Karna is an enigma. Karna became Karna had a lot of problems, a lot of issues. People make a hero out of him, that's good. He had good qualities. But giving alms and charity at that time was very common to all Kshatriyas. So, Karna was not an only exception. But Karna had one very big problem. He was very much enemy-centered. And during the Mahabharata war, he never focused on his own qualities. He was always thinking about doing better than Arjuna and the Pandavas. So when Shalya was his charioteer at one point of time, they had an altercation. Shalya and Karna began to have a verbal fight. Although he was the charioteer, they started fighting. They started arguing. So Shalya told him an interesting story. He said, your problem is you're not authentic. And then he gave a story. He said, you are trying to be like a swan. So he gave an example. He said, once a crow challenged a swan. The crow said, this is Shalya's story to Karna. Okay? So he said, the crow told the swan that, oh, what is this? You fly so great. What is your great about your flying? I know 100 innovative ways of flying, expert styles of flying, and I can defeat you. I challenge you. The swan said, okay. So they began to fly, and the crow started flying up and down, then a triangular pose, and different poses he started. So the swan kept flying, the crow kept flying, and finally they reached the ocean. And the ocean is huge. So when the swan was flying, and at one point of time the crow realized, now I can't do it. And when he realized, he was exhausted and he fell. And as he was falling and as he was about to touch the water, the swan came and said, so, my dear crow, if this is one of your 100 tricks, and this is where Shalya stops the story. He is trying to make the point that if you are a crow, be happy. Crow also has its advantages. Crow also has a unique place. But if a crow desires to swim across the ocean, if the crow says, I want to swim across the ocean, and he gets a lot of self-help gurus, motivational speakers to help him, it's all useless because that determination won't help to fly over the ocean because you are a crow. Now, I'm not against crows, don't get me wrong. Crow, see, we are all unique. What petrol can do, water cannot do. Both have their utility. Everybody is unique. What wood also we need, right? And a small ant, everybody has a place in this creation. So we are not against crows, but please try to get the point that all determination techniques are useless if you are a crow and you're determined to be a swan, fly like a swan. So authenticity means to know, our His Holiness Sridhar Maharaj would always say, know who you are. He would say 2 principles for a happy life. He said, know who you are and do what you can. So I've seen a lot of people emphasize a lot on determination. Yes, determination is important. But there is something more important than determination, and that is to basically be situated in our natural position. Because there is something more powerful than determination. Do you know what is that? That is time. Time can crush our determination if we are not rightly situated. So, therefore, the first principle is be, B-E, being. We are human being. So, if I am situated properly, then I can do. B means sattva guna. Do is rajas, action. Generally, we want to do things and then we think I'll be happy. True, but I also first need to be in my natural situation according to Varnashram or according to whatever. And then in that platform when we do, we'll be mentally peaceful. Otherwise, we live in the have space. Have means, I don't have this. That is tamoguna. I don't have this. I wish I had this. Some people, because they are in B, they are naturally situated, they are authentic, they know who they are, their actions, what they do, is in congruence with their being. And then, they have or not have, they are peaceful. Some people, they think, I will do this activity and then I will be happy. And there are some most unfortunate people, they say, if only I have this, then I will do this, and then I will be happy. That is the worst. So I don't want to get into all these technical things, but the point I wanted to make was determination is basically a short-term currency. Let's not talk, a lot of self-help teachers talk about determination and, be hardworking and all. That's true. But first we need to be authentic. That is the foundation. And a classic example I want to share with you today is a fascinating example. And I did my own research and I discovered this during my study, reading. And this example has fascinated me so much. In the last 3 years, I've spoken this so many times. This is about one Chinese weightlifting man. His name is Wu Jingbiao. Forget the name, but get the point. The story of Wu Jingbiao versus one Chinese swimmer girl, 20-year-old girl, called Fu Huanhui. Very nice story. So Wu Jingbiao lifted in the London Olympics, July 2012, July 26 to be precise. And he was being interviewed, all the media was there, and he was crying. Oh, I'm sorry, I let my motherland down. I have shamed my motherland. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh. He was crying. So what do you think he must have done? He must have thought, some of you must be thinking he must have failed in the doping test. He must have tested positive for the drugs or something like that. But you know what had happened actually? He had won a silver medal for his country. Can you imagine? Silver medal and he's crying. Why he's crying? Because he didn't win gold. कैसा लगा story? I want to say something here. Henry David Thoreau says, be yourself. Not your idea of what you think. Somebody else's idea of yourself should be. Which means in China, what is happening is, they have produced a factory, gold medal producing factory. So children are taken at the age of 4 and they are dumped into a concentration camp like place. Till the age of 18, 14 years they stay, cut off from family, friends, relatives. Even when their parents or relatives die, they don't get news. Every year, 30,000 children are trained to get a gold medal in Olympics. So imagine what terrible life. For a 2-minute performance, 1-minute performance, after 14 years, so that we get, because China derives soft power through Olympic supremacy. They think that if we get more gold medals, then we are a powerful nation. That's their conditioning. So then they produce this factory and they produce all these cardboard personalities who have no emotions, who are not authentic. They lead such an artificial life. They come, perform for 2 minutes, get a medal. They can't play long games like cricket and all that. 5 days, impossible. Recently, China played one cricket match, 50-over match with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is not a great team. Saudi Arabia scored 450 runs in 50 overs against China. China is a national team. There are 130 registered countries under ICC. They all have all the criteria to be a registered cricket playing nation, although they may not play Test and World Cup and all that. And then China came to bat all out for 26 runs because they want all fast. They can't play. So China, they can't play all, artistic sports. They're all cardboard personalities. Fatafat karo, medal jito, we are great. So Wu Jingbiao also was training. And if you don't get a gold medal, silver medalist, bronze medalist, they are like beggars. They don't get anything. So China won 48 gold medals in Beijing Olympics in 2008. And then 4 years later, when it was in London, it came down to 38. And the whole country was lamenting. From 48, we came down to 38. And Wu Jingbiao, he was causing more anxiety by saying things like, I have shamed my motherland. I'm so fallen. I'm so bad. And people are also saying, yes, we have not done well. Another 4 years passed. And it was again Olympics in Brazil, Rio de Janeiro. And there, China got even lesser gold medals. They got 26, from 48 to 38 to 26. But this girl, whom you see here, Fu Huanhui, she burst the bubble. She shocked the China. What happened? She was doing some swimming event, 200 meters, some swimming. And when she got a bronze, she came third. So as soon as she got up, the media was there. So they asked her, you won the bronze. And she said, no, what was my timing? She immediately, spontaneously asked, and this was all live. And she saw, she was bronze, but she had done better than her previous performance. So she started thumping her arms in the air and she started jumping and dancing as if she was more happy than the one who won the gold medal. And she was ecstatic and euphoric. And immediately, in 5 minutes, she became an online sensation in China. The whole country began talking about her. And in 24 hours, she became a national hero. Because that was the moment of epiphany for China. Everybody started talking, what the hell are we doing in our lives? Why are we crazy for gold medals? Look at this girl. And she was a young girl, she was 19 or 20 at that time. And she was just very girlish. And seeing her natural innocence, her spontaneity, her inside outside, her congruency, people became emotional. And then she had basically burst the bubble of obsession with extraordinary greatness, which is there, the success and fame, which is driving all of us mad. Because what happens because of all this is that we become blind to simple and ordinary pleasures that we can experience in our lives. And this reckless achievement drive that we have been brainwashed with, it squelches the joy of living. We just get so disconnected from ourselves. And she became a hero. And then when I read this story 3 years ago, I was so fascinated. And you know, when I have seen that when you are excited about something, the Lord arranges you to get the right kind of information and you get the right kind of stories. So then what came to my news was something really which fascinated me. Two personality story. All of you have heard of Michael Phelps. Michael Phelps has won more gold medals in his career than India has won in the last 120 years. American, he has won more than 75 medals and gold medals, more than 20, I think. How many gold medals is 28? Crazy. But Michael Phelps, after 2012 Olympics, now interesting, John Pierre de Coubertin, who was the founder of Olympics, he gave that motto, that in Olympics, winning is not important, taking part is more important. Just like in life, triumph is not important, but the struggle is more important. At the end of the day, it's more important that you have fought well. But nobody remembers this. Everybody wants to be number one. So Michael Phelps won so many gold medals. He won the first gold medal at the age of 19. And at the age of 29, now please listen to this very carefully. A 19-year-old boy wins a gold medal. And at the age of 29, he had so many gold medals, so much of world fame, success. And what did he say after the London Olympics? Look at the gold medals he has. I am done with sports. I don't want anything to do with sports anymore. He wanted to commit suicide. He was arrested 3 times for driving under the influence of alcohol. He was banned by America Swimming Association. He was in acute depression. Why this success? What are you trying to prove to whom? Now contrast Michael Phelps with Ian Miller. Now you may not know him. Ian Miller is the one on the horse. If I tell you his story, some of you may be shocked. Now Michael Phelps is on the right side. You can see he looks depressed. But Ian Miller is on the horse. And believe it or not, this man has taken part in Olympics since 1978. 10 times he has represented his country. Last 40 years, he is representing Canada in equestrian event. And the last Olympics he took part, he was 64 years old. And he's never won a gold medal. Only once in 2008 Olympics he won a silver medal. And he comes on behalf of his country. He's the best in his country. And in the Olympics he always comes 4th, 5th, or once he got a silver medal. But he comes every year. Every Olympics he is there. And if you ask a young aspiring athlete, he must not have heard of Ian Miller, but he will know Michael Phelps. But Ian Miller is a greater inspiration. When he was asked, you have been taking part for last 40 years, you are coming every Olympics. Are you not frustrated you don't get gold medal? He said, no, I enjoy the sport. I love it. And I want to win, but I don't win. Okay. Now sports has become obsession. It's equated with patriotism. It's crazy. Our Indian cricket team is playing for BCCI. They are not playing. BCCI has appointed them. BCCI is paying them. And we make it a national event. Indian pride will not increase if they win World Cup. Indian pride will increase more if we take care of our social evils and we do something about on so many areas of our society, right? Because what is this World Cup? Actually, if you see, I have nothing against. I also feel happy when India wins matches, to be honest. But I don't have the patience to watch the match. That's another thing. But I feel very happy when I hear morning, India jeet gaya, arey, good, good. But I don't know why I feel happy, but I feel happy. So, if you see World Cup, what is this? There are actually 6 countries playing. England, Australia, New Zealand, West Indies, South Africa, and South Asia. India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Afghanistan, they're all one small, just like West Indies is a conglomeration of a few countries. South Asia. What about the other countries? What about Germany, America? Anyway, nobody is there. Cricket is not the issue. The point I'm saying is, let's not create so much of hype and pressure and, let's not get disconnected from ourselves. Let's be authentic. And the best example of authenticity we find in Ramayana. When all these monkey soldiers were planning to jump across Lanka, they got news that Mother Sita is in Lanka. So then they had to make a plan. Who will jump? Now all the monkey soldiers in Sugriva army, they wanted to go to Lanka, get Mother Sita, but look at their authenticity. One monkey soldier said, I can jump only 10 miles. But if at 20, Angada said, I can jump all the 100, but I can't come back. It's not that they could have said, somebody could have said, you're not sincere. You'll be empowered by Guru and Lord Ram. Just jump. सोचने का नहीं. सर पे कफन बांध के निकल जाओ. निकले तो क्या वो? हम निकले थे घर से बांध कर सर पे कफन, जान हथेली पर लिए लो बढ़ चले हैं ये कदम, जिंदगी तो अपनी मेहमान मौत की महफिल में है, सरफरोशी की तमन्ना अब हमारे दिल में है. All very pet, it looks sounds very nice. देखना है जोर कितना बाजुए कातिल में है लिए हथियार दुश्मन ताक में बैठा उधर, और हम तैयार हैं सीना लिए अपना इधर, खून से खेलेंगे होली अगर वतन मुश्किल में है. These are very poetic, sounds great, wow. I'm going to do this. But no, you don't have to. Because the monkey soldiers are all honest about their limitations. I am not, and Hanuman, when Jambavan reminded Hanuman, Jambavan is a great hero, he's a teacher. There are no temples for Jambavan. Hanuman is glorified, that's okay. But Jambavan didn't go and complain to Lord Ram. Arey, mai kya? Jambavan is not accusing anybody of politics. Arey, I am the one who helped Hanuman actually jump. So all monkey soldiers are honest. And there was a squirrel also who carried pebbles. So in Lord Ram's army, everybody has place. So in this human society, we all can make unique contributions. We just have to be authentic. We don't have to be somebody else. There is a place for Narendra Modi also, there is place for Rahul Gandhi also. But if Rahul Gandhi tries to be Modi, then there can be some problem. No, everybody has a place. So what I'm trying to say is somebody isn't living in a chawl, simple, lower middle class family. Okay. But you see all stars on the screen, glamorous, living in big mansions, beautiful, with beautiful girlfriends, boyfriends. So then the message, the subliminal transmission is, oh, I need to have all this to be successful. And then we get disconnected from our authentic self. We try to get more money, try to be like the rich and famous. But who has defined this? Who has given this criteria? That is the point. I was doing my research for my book. I wrote a book called Cricket in a Monastery. So I would go and meet different cricket coaches at this Oval Maidan, Shivaji Park, different places. So one cricket coach I made friends with is a Konkani man. He's been coaching for last 50 years. He's an old man now, 70 plus. And all children come, they touch his feet. And he was telling me how children travel from Dhanu, as far as Dhanu, with the heavy kit. They travel one way, 2.5 hours, just to practice in this nets here. And he said, most of them, how many will get into the Indian cricket team? They all have dreams of becoming Dhoni, Kohli. And many of them, they get into bad habits, vices, because of frustration. In fact, I did some research and I found out, the Indian under-19 World Cup winning team, most of the players, they didn't even make it to their state Ranji Trophy team. And most of them suffered because they just couldn't handle the pressure. What about them? Is cricket everything? We get obsessed. We become close-minded. We can't even see life beyond what we are doing now. So to be authentic, to be successful, we don't need the pomp and glory that the world is promising. This is a very famous personality. The man on your right is Lord Mountbatten, the last Governor General of India. And the man on your left, many of you may not know, but if I had put Deepika Padukone's photo, everybody would have recognized her. But this man was one of the first to get Bharat Ratna, Sri Rajgopalachari. He is the first and last Indian Governor General of India. Rajgopalachari is a simple man. I grew up reading his Mahabharata and Ramayana. And when Mountbatten went to England to attend his nephew's wedding, the Governor General's post was vacant. So he told Nehru, said, I'm busy, I'm the Prime Minister now, I just can't leave this. Vallabhbhai Patel was busy because he was actually doing the work of unifying the country. So he had no time. So then what to do? So Rajaji was said that, aap thoda manage kar lo. So he was staying in the Governor General's huge mansion for 6 months. And when Mountbatten came back, he was shocked because the staff in that Governor General's bungalow gave a report. Rajgopalachari ji, he did all the job perfect, but he was always you took facility of only one room. He slept on the floor. He washed his own clothes, ate simple khichdi, and was busy. He took no leave, did his job perfectly well, and now he has gone back. Ho gaya, mera kaam ho gaya, detached. So Mountbatten, for him it was because he had a different experience with some other leaders. So he was shocked. So he called the Congress Working Committee and he said that you should make this person as the Governor General. So then because of his insistence, Rajgopalachari was made the Governor General. And he was personally such an unassuming person, but he had so much wisdom and clarity of thought. He has given commentary on all issues from art, music, mathematics to politics to nuclear programs. And when Richard Nixon met him for 15 minutes, so many world leaders would meet him here and there for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And 30 years later, Richard Nixon wrote a book and he said, he met Rajgopalachari only for 10-15 minutes. He was the President of America, Richard Nixon. He said, the most profound effect in my life was that 15 minutes meeting with Indian statesman Rajgopalachari. There was no greatness in his life. There was no pomp in his life. There was substance. Now, we need to focus on that. The world may sing your glories or may not. That's inconsequential. There are many people who are stars. In the Second World War, we all glorify Winston Churchill. Wow, he was the one who helped. But there was one young Russian girl, Lyudmila Pavlenchikov. She was a sniper. She wanted to fight for her country. But she just got no opportunity because she was a woman. They said, no, you should just be the nurse in the hospitals. But somehow she got the determination, saw her through, and she single-handedly killed 350 German soldiers. It's officially recorded. She killed more soldiers, and Germany gave them a hard time. It's a long story. So she's a national hero. And then she met with an accident and she broke her leg, and then she was ready to go back to war. The country, the government, the chief, they all had to stop her. Because you are too precious for us now. Because now you have to live to tell your stories. So then she was not allowed to. But the point I'm saying is, we have not heard of her. So we could see this life is like a war. We all have our struggles. We all have our fights. So let us not get distracted. Because the pomp and glory makes us inauthentic. Because it makes us perform according to what the world wants. Paisa feko, tamasha dekho. That is their mood. But if that is not what you are, don't let the noise of others' opinions and their desires drown the voice of your heart. Their noise is very loud. So, and I would like to say one story of non-acceptance, the price that you have to pay, from history. This is a classic story of Babur. Babur, all of you know who is he? The first Indian Mughal invader who came. He's a classic story of living in denial and living an inauthentic life. At the age of 11, he was made the king of Fergana Valley, which is in the present day Uzbekistan. But he, what is his, and all his taste and liking was for gardening, poetry, music, spirituality. But his father's side was Taimur and mother's side was Genghis Khan. Great tyrants and merciless killers. So he had to keep up the parampara, the tradition. So under pressure, he wanted to conquer Samarkand, which is a little far away. And he went there leading a big army. Took a long time. He got Samarkand, then he lost it. But by the time then he came back to Fargana Valley, his brother had taken over. Then he had nothing. And then they chased him to the mountains in Central Asia. And that was the time he could have left all of this, because that was not, he writes in his journal, he keeps writing again and again. What am I doing? Why am I invading? I am a philosopher. I am a poet. But because he was, we get brainwashed. We try to be what we are not. And he was all his life, he tried to be what he was not. Then from the Central Asian mountains, he collected an army, attacked Afghanistan, and then he got into all kind of unmentionable habits, which we cannot discuss in a cultured group like this. The kind of relationships he had, the kind of things he did, intoxication and drugs is all very silly compared to what he was actually doing. And he knew that that's not he, but he was so disconnected from himself. Eventually, he wanted to come to New Delhi, what we call New Delhi now. Delhi, and then the way he attacked Ibrahim Lodi, and the way 2 days, the way they massacred North India, it's one hell of a story. When you read it, you'll be shocked that this happened in just 1526, that is what, just 500 years ago. And then you would think now that he's conquered northern India, you'd be the happiest man because he got everything. He got Afghanistan, he got India, he got a lot of, but he was not happy because you're still lamenting over having lost Samarkand. Oh, nahi mila. And at that time, India was seeing a spiritual revolution. Guru Nanak came at that time. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu spread Bhakti movement at that time. And he also had a choice of leading that kind of a life, spreading goodness, because that was what he was. But see how history has taken shape. Happiness and personal fulfillment is a natural consequence of doing the right thing. But the more we are disconnected from, see he did the things rightly. After losing so many wars, finally he got the techniques and strategies to win the war. So he started doing things rightly, but he was not doing the right thing. He was so disconnected. So therefore, this is a very nice statement I like. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice, Steve Jobs. And Frederick Douglass says, I prefer to be true to myself even at the hazard of incurring the ridicule of others rather than to be false and to incur my own abhorrence. It's a paradox, conscience, the inner voice, that is a small voice. Conscience is a small voice. But unfortunately, it is too loud for our comfort. When we get attached to our comfort zone, that small voice becomes too loud. We don't want to hear it. We want to live in denial. No, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. So the truth is we always know what is the right thing. But the hard part is doing it. And we don't do it. And I would like to end with this point about authenticity with one last example. And then we'll go to the next point. This is a story of one very famous movie director. This person's name is not Amir Khan, the one next to Amir Khan is Mansoor Khan, his cousin. In our society, hardly anyone has been taught how to think, while millions have been taught what to think. So Mansoor Khan was the son of Nasir Hussain, who was one of the most famous movie makers in the 1970s. And he was making movies, and he was a household name, considered as one of the most best directors. And his son got into the prestigious IIT. Mansoor Khan got into IIT. And then he did his master's from Cornell, MIT, he went to US. Very flashy biodata, excellent. When he came back, the Bollywood was suffering, all third-grade movies were coming out. And it was all boring, useless. And then enters Mansoor Khan. And he makes a blockbuster, Qayamat Se Qayamat Tak. And everybody is talking about it. That movie wins National Award. And everybody praised his direction. And Mansoor Khan was feeling from within, something is wrong here. This is not me. Why should I do this just because my father is a great filmmaker? And why should I just get into all this? This is not me. To such an extent that he fought hard to ensure that his name doesn't come in the credits of the film. Directed by, आता ना end में, yeah, starting. But there was a big fight for weeks. Finally, they had to put his name against his wish. He said, because I don't want to be in this, but I don't know what I'm doing. And meanwhile, the country, the whole India is talking about a great director, what excellent music, excellent fresh faces, what brilliant direction. He became a household name. And then he made a second movie. And that won even more awards. And then it was said that he is here to stay. This man has revolutionized filmmaking. His second movie also won National Award for Best Film. Meanwhile, he was feeling the void and vacuum in his heart was just growing. Today, where is he? Nobody knows, but we know where he is. He then went, he said, no, there is something wrong. He was connecting to himself. He would go to the slum areas, northern Mumbai. He would do some research on their lifestyle. Finally, right now he's in Kunnur, in Tamil Nadu. He's taken some land. He's taking care of cows. He uses cow dung patties to cook. He has some 25 cows he's serving nicely. Leading a very simple, peaceful life. His wife and children, it took him a lot of time to convince them. Now they're all together. And he's now into writing. He writes a lot of books. He's written a book called Third Curve on economics. It's a purely economics book. See, from engineering to filmmaking to cow protection, and now he's writing book. And this book has become so popular, he goes and presents this in all management institutes, IIMs. And nobody would know that few decades ago, he was like a household name for a different reason. And now he's so happy being who he is. It is the sign of a great mind to dislike greatness and to prefer things in measure to things in excess. So let us not get carried away by the pomp and glory, because the advertising world is there to convince us to be inauthentic. When the biggest revolution happened in 1920s, when Edward Bernays, he is considered as father of advertising. In 1920s, the cigarette market for cigarette smoking was only men would smoke at that time. And the cigarette companies were thinking how to increase the sales. So he came into the brilliant idea. He said 50% market we have not tapped. So they said, how will you do it? So you know what he did? During those days, male chauvinism was rampant in America. Now we think India mein male chauvinism, America mein bhi bahut hai. So women were very upset with the oppression by the men. So Edward Bernays, what he promised women, he got all the prominent ladies of New York and he took a morcha, procession. All of them had cigarettes in their hand. And the slogan was, these are torches of freedom. Look at the way he presented it. So now women wanted freedom. So he tapped on that sentiment and he gave them a cigarette. These are torches of freedom. So smoking cigarette became associated with freedom. So some intelligent people would ask these women, what is the connection with freedom and cigarettes? No. They were in denial. No, this is great. We are free from the male shackles. See, this is how they cheat us. I have a friend who is in ITC. He told me Gold Flake cigarettes has this honey dew. He says it's subliminal. Because if you keep repeating honey dew, honey dew, honey dew, honey dew, I need you, I need you. So he says this is official. They've actually thought about it like that. So there's a whole world out to get you. Get your freedom, get your authenticity, get you. So we need to be careful. And this man, Mansoor Khan, had the courage to stand. And Edward Bernays, interestingly, he never smoked. He knew it is dangerous. But because he kept talking torches of freedom, his wife got into smoking. And he was desperately trying to stop her. It's a long story. And then he got, that's another completely different story. So this is the first and the most important point I wanted to discuss today. That authenticity. So if you want to lead a life of acceptance, let us be more authentic. And you may say, okay, but I need skills, I need to know something, it's all abstract concepts. So we are going to share three things that you could immediately start doing which can help you lead a more authentic life. So acceptance is based on this principle. I like this poem. I took this from a poem of Longfellow. For after all, the best thing one can do when it is raining is let it rain. There are some things in life, we need to accept. So this is a story I want to say about one man called Kamlesh Oza. True story. He was rising in his career. He wanted to be a senior vice president and all that. He was growing. But he was not happy. And he was desperately trying for this position. And finally, he got the coveted position. And after he got the position, he met one of our devotees and he was talking to us. He said he was not at all happy. And then we did some, counseling, talking. And what came out was amazing. From childhood, he wanted to be a teacher of children. But in his society, everybody was getting into medicine, engineering. And during those days, doing BA was considered as something very, if you're not good in anything, you would do BA. If you're smart, you would become a doctor or an engineer. A BSc, BA, BCom last was BA. So he wanted to study history, he wanted to be a teacher, but everybody else was doing this. And his parents were very successful doctors. So, and he was struggling just to keep up to their desire, their thing. So finally, against his interest, he did engineering. So when we went to past, all these things came out. But right now, these are all in the subconscious. Externally, he's thinking, I want to be the vice president, I want to work hard. But deep within, these were the issues. But then finally, he realized, yes, I want to be a teacher. But now, how do I change? I can't do anything. Come on, my life is all settled. I have loans, I have this, I have that. But then the truth was, he will not be happy as long as he's not authentic. So what do we do now? So simple, there are 3 steps. First is affirmations. This is because it's already accepted. After acceptance, we're not talking about skills. How we can actually connect to our own selves better. So affirmations is positive statements in the present tense. So he would constantly keep saying, I am a teacher, I teach children, as if it's happening now. It's a statement in the present tense. So he kept saying, I love children, I love to teach history, I am a very happy history teacher. Now you may say, but he's working in a multinational company. He's a vice president. But because he wanted to be authentic, he started connecting to his core personality. And he did this exercise for a long time. And generally what happens is when we practice affirmations for a long time, the universe arranges certain things in a certain way. Because that becomes your inner language. Now, along with affirmations, Kamlesh Oza also started visualization. Visualization is when you start thinking that this is how this is how I'll be teaching and this will happen. Like in sports, if you have played sports, the coaches, they teach you visualization. You actually visualize that he's going to ball like this, I'm going to bat like this. In tennis also they do that. And Arnold Schwarzenegger, he was from a very bad childhood. His father would abuse him. He went through a lot of pain. But he would always do visualization. He created a vision of what he wants to be. And he would keep playing it in his mind. And that's why he went on to become who he is. One of the biggest, most famous bodybuilders of all time. And one of the best examples of visualization is one young Russian boy called Alekhine. He was pitted against Jose Capablanca, who was Cuban chess legend. So this Capablanca was a chess champion, grandmaster, world champion for many years. And Alekhine was a young boy. Nobody gave him a chance. Everybody said he's going to lose. And even he was shocked that he reached the finals of the World Chess Championship. But what Alekhine did was shocking. 2.5 months this contest went on, and finally Alekhine won. And when they asked him what was the secret, how could he defeat such a big champion? And you know what he had done? He had practiced little, but he had spent more time in the mountains, relaxing, and he would visualize every day that he's playing and this is the moves he would do. Visualization created a reality first in his own mind, And that eventually the reality outside happened later. But first he created that. So same thing Kamlesh Ozaji was doing. You would imagine he's teaching, going to the slum areas, he's teaching the children history. And all this he is doing while he is absorbed in his work and family. It's not that he's neglecting any of those things. And then the third and the most important step here is baby steps. What happens is universe arranges. Somewhere you get, because you have a strong desire and you're also affirming, you're visualizing. So then he got an offer from one NGO that on weekends, if you have time, why don't you go spend 2 hours with these slum children, do them something like this. So he got some offer somewhere, he grabbed it. You know, when you're wanting to smell something like this, and when things come, you grab with both your hands. But then he started doing, and then that became eventually 2 days a week, then twice a month, and it started increasing. And then, you know what happens? Different things fall in place in different ways. You will not believe it. He is financially stable, like Mansoor Khan's story. Today, he is full-time teacher, and his family has no serious issues with him. There may be issues like any other family has, but not that his whole, we imagine that मेरा financial situation क्या होगा, ये होगा. बहुत सारा हम सोच के रखते हैं ऐसा होगा, ऐसा. Actually ऐसा नहीं होता बहुत बार. Because now he feels more fulfilled, because this was his calling for a long time. Otherwise our mind can make a hell out of heaven. Who was that? Paradise Lost, who wrote? John Milton, he says. Mind is such a thing, it can make heaven out of hell and hell out of heaven. And Paulo Coelho, in this very famous book, Alchemist, it's actually more popular than even Harry Potter in one sense, in number of sales. So he says in the introduction of the book that most people are afraid of success. Very innovative, very unique thing he says. Because their minds are so hardwired that just when they're on the verge of success, their mind cheats them and they give it up, because there is a sense of pride and glory in being renounced and giving up things. So just when we can get success, we give it up. You may want to do something in life and it may be just at your doorstep, but you may let it go. Because we are trained to be losers from within. So if you are connected to yourself, if you really know who you are, you will see the universe is sending signals. You may get opportunity to do and be what you are, what you want to do. But are you ready for it? Otherwise, the most successful position, you can go crazy. Kevin Carter is a classic example. He took this photograph. This is an iconic photograph. In Sudan, I didn't put this on the screen. I'm sorry. This is a great photograph. Scary. So in Sudan, he was a South African photographer, and there was a famine going on, and there was a vulture standing to a small baby who was struggling for food. When this photo came in the newspaper, this is 1993 I'm talking about, and that was a day when internet was not so active. But still this photograph came in all the newspapers of the world. But Kevin Carter, he became a legend immediately, overnight. And he won the Pulitzer Prize. He won so many awards. But there are some people who said, there is another vulture here, the one who's taking the photograph. So then he got so depressed that within 3 months he committed suicide. So he didn't get the award, he got it posthumously. He's so famous, but his mind just couldn't handle it. So our mind is extremely deadly. So let us start by doing what is necessary, then do what is possible, and suddenly you will do the impossible. Let us not underestimate our abilities. So if we simply start practicing affirmations, some visualization, and little baby steps, then you don't have to wait for good things to happen to you. You can just start. Otherwise, some of the most successful and happy people, they have a very painful life just because they are not just being true to who they are. Meena Kumari is a classic example. Meena Kumari is, I think, known to all the older people here who have seen Bollywood movies. Meena Kumari was so graceful in her acting. Tragedy queen. Or even real life was a tragedy. When she would present herself, she was very poetic also. She would talk and her biography, I read in college, I remember. When she would be in the sets, even top actors like Raj Kapoor or Devanand, they would all falter in front of her. because she was so gracious, she was so charming, and she was so beautiful that, so attractive that when they went for shooting for Pakiza at Madhya Pradesh, in the night time there something happened with the vehicle, so they had to park there in the night. They were attacked by the band of dacoits. Amrit Lal was he was the most wanted dacoit in India at that time. His gang attacked Meena Kumari's tent, and it was a big, scary situation. And he entered her tent, and everybody was scared what's going to happen. He's going to molest her, it's going to be scary, he's going to attack her. But the shock of everyone, he went close to her and gave her his dragger and pulled up his sleeves and said, "Autograph, please." He was such a great fan of Meena Kumari. And she actually autographed him. You can imagine her popularity, her success, her beauty. And just a few years later, when the movie actually released, Pakiza, it took 16 years to make. And when the movie released here at Maratha Mandir, near Bombay Central, there were riots. People are desperate to see her. But her life nobody talks about. Only suffering. And eventually she died after having 5 or 6 failed relationships. Liver cirrhosis she had become because of drinking too much liquor. She had got addicted to liquor. And she died here alone and penniless. Just Malabar Hill, if you go up, Teen Batti, you know Teen Batti here. There is Elizabeth Nursing Home. There outside in a bed she was lying. And Kamal Amroi, her husband, then the news broke out, and then there was a lot of debt she had to pay. So that when I read that biography, it was so scary what we see on screen, and the reality is completely different. So this is how mind can cause intense suffering for us, and that is the third topic: how we can face suffering, how we can live with suffering. So there are 2 points we discussed under acceptance. We need to have some skills like affirmations, baby steps, visualization. We also need to be more authentic, to be more to practice acceptance in our lives. Also, there are three ways to see suffering in our lives. Now, suffering is common. Everybody goes through some problems or the other. We have to accept life is harsh. Life is tough. I would just like to tell one story here. This is a Persian poet, Rumi, who said, "Wound is the place where light enters you." This man on the right, Roald Amundsen, is a Norwegian. From childhood, he wanted to be the first man to reach North Pole. And he was really planning, trying, dreaming. And one day he saw in the newspapers, 2 Americans have reached North Pole. He became shattered. So he decided, I will be the first man to reach the South Pole. So he started practicing. But at that time, there was a British Navy officer, Robert Scott. He had been practicing for 15 years to be the first man to reach South Pole. So a competition began. And Roald, and this is not easy, going to South Pole is almost, they had to travel from some point, I read it long back, 50 kilometers, they have to travel every day, minus 40 degrees, with all those things, and they didn't have such equipment. This is 1912 we are talking about. With whatever they had, facilities, it's a very graphic description, how they would have all these dogs to carry their, what is that called, sledges, and then how they would carry extra dogs so that some of the dogs they would kill and eat as meat. And their lifestyle, their daily schedule, if you read, it's so scary. So their competition began. And Robert Scott was desperate to be the first man. And the whole England was behind him. He was an Englishman. But finally, when he reached there with his team, he saw a Norwegian flag there. Roald Amundsen had reached 5 weeks before him. And the moment they reached there, Robert Scott writes in his diary, my 30 years of penance, my 30 years of struggle, everything is a waste. Life is worthless. No, see, so much struggle he did. He could have been happy that I am second man. Second was acha hota. But we just couldn't take it. And so much suffering he went through that on the return journey, all five of them died. And then later on, the search operations, the search team, they found the diary and all that. And they died an unnecessary death because internally they were shattered. And Roald Amundsen, you would think he must be very happy because he was the first man. But he writes in his diary that at that point when I was at South Pole, God damn it, I was so miserable because I wanted to be the first man to reach the North Pole. So when suffering knocks at your door and you say there is no seat for him, he tells you not to worry because he has bought his own stool. We always think others are happy. Oh, they are living in big mansions, they must be very happy. Everybody, the most famous people, and sometimes you may think, oh, renounced order people, they must be very happy. There are many closely guarded secrets even in the renounced order. Even they have their own cup of woes. Everybody has some problems. So there are 3 steps to face this suffering. First is recognize and accept that misery is inevitable. Everybody has to go through this. I always say this 4-word mantra. Some of you know me, have heard this. No one is spared. No one is spared. Second, now you agree that in this world everything is organized so nicely in the cosmic macro level and at the micro level. So there is a plan and intention in the universe. So similarly, when I am going through some pain, suffering in my life, there has to be some plan, some design, some purpose behind it. Definitely. अगर सब कुछ चीज़ का कुछ तो plan है, तो मेरे suffering का भी कुछ तो plan होगा. And third, which is most important, which is our next topic, we'll take it up in our next series in August, is when we have a deep sense of purpose and an aspiration, then we can face suffering. And these were the 2 contrasting examples of how they faced suffering. The man on your right is Napoleon Bonaparte. Have you heard of him? French emperor. On your left is Rockefeller, whose only son went to Indonesian islands and he was eaten by the cannibals. He was the richest man in the world. Rockefeller was influencing who would be the president of America. In 1960s, his only son went to Indonesian islands for studying sociology, some report he was doing. And his subject, the study subject, they ate him up. They were cannibals. And Rockefeller became so devastated. He lost the next 40 years of his life, he lived like a vegetable. The richest man. He just couldn't handle that misery. And Napoleon Bonaparte was such a powerful French emperor, but in the Battle of Waterloo, when the British forces arrested him and he was dumped into St. Helena Islands in South Africa, and there he was treated worse than an ordinary prisoner. He was fed horse urine. He was tortured. An ordinary man, a common man won't face that kind of humiliation which he faced. But he was always gracious, equipoised, and he came to terms with it. He took that pain, that misery. And today, in 2019, all military schools, they teach different wars. Napoleon's all battle strategies are taught. He's still considered as a great example. So you can imagine, Napoleon Bonaparte had to go through suffering. Rockefeller had to go through. So who are you and me? And that is one of the biggest myths of happiness in this world is, it's natural to be happy. Bhagavatam smashes this. No, happiness is one of the many emotions. Many feelings are there. Sometimes you are happy also. But if you say always happiness, that is wrong. Like weather is always there. But rain will not always be there. Sometimes it will be summer, winter. Similarly, emotions, feelings will be there. Sometimes there will be happiness. But our modern society, how they brainwash us, it's natural to be happy, you have to always be happy. No! This is wrong. And the second problem is, one is happiness is natural. This is what we have been taught. Second, happiness is always associated with the feeling. If happiness is a feeling for you, then you will never, most of the time you will not be happy. Because feelings come and go. It's fleeting. If happiness is a feeling, then be rest assured, most of the time you will not be happy. Because it's just fleeting. If you have a sense of purpose and aspiration, then sometimes you'll be happy, sometimes you'll not be happy. But that purpose will keep driving you for a fulfilling life. Are you getting what I'm trying to share? There is something more. Like some of you are mothers here. You love your child, right? How many of you are mothers here? Ah, so many hands. You love your child. Are you always happy thinking about your child? What are the different feelings you get with regards to your child? Stress. Thank you. Anger. You get sometimes angry. Angry. What else? Helpless. Angry. Frustrated. Stress. Sad also. But I know many women, for them, it's complete. They feel complete when they become mothers. Motherhood is so they're psychophysically they are made in such a way they may actually find fulfillment in being a mother, but happiness is not what they experience. They experience complete range of emotions that life gives them, in which happiness is one small part. But if you say no, I only want to be happy, then please be ready for misery. Because Bhagavatam says, if you want to be miserable, keep asking yourself, am I happy? So our modern society is a happiness obsession society. We have made such a big thing out of being happy. No, it's okay. This is the third myth, that there is something wrong with you if you are not happy. Are you not happy? Oh, take some counseling. No, we are telling you it's completely normal not to be happy sometimes. It's okay. How do you like it? You'll see, when we practice, this is acceptance. This is actually acceptance, what we are talking now. I accept I am not happy and it's fine. Like I remember somebody came to me, they wanted me to come for a meeting. They wanted to decide on something. I said, Prabhu, I can't come today. Why, Prabhu? Aa jao na aaj. Sunday. I said, no, today I am not happy. What? I said, I can contribute better when I am happy. Something happened and then I had to do something. I had to get a new house for my mother and some things were going on. He said, I could see he was disturbed. I said, I'm not happy, but I'm okay. I'll be okay tomorrow. So we are scared to even admit, we live in so much denial that we don't want to say that I'm not happy today. So these are the three myths of happiness. One is, happiness is natural. We say, no, it's not natural. It's one of the many emotions. And secondly, happiness is not simply a feeling. If happiness is a feeling for you, then you will not be happy most of the time. And third, most important, there is something wrong with you if you are not happy. This is another myth. We say, I'm not happy and I'm okay. There is a book, no? I am okay, you are okay. So we say, I am not okay, you are not okay, but we are okay. We are okay not being okay. That's how life is. So let us not get into, and Bhagavatam teaches us with the example of Avanti Brahman. Srila Prabhupada writes about Avanti Brahman, who gets this big realization that, because he was a very rich man, then he became, and he was very miserly. And then he lost everything in his business. Then people started ridiculing him and harassing him, and then he became penniless. And then he starts crying, and then he says, no, actually I realized, and that realization makes him very peaceful, that nobody is responsible. And we have many examples in society. We don't have time to share their stories. But the first lady you see, who is she? J.K. Rowling. She said that she would always get these nightmares, that every publisher would reject her book. And she said, and she would get nightmares most of the time. And I liked her statement she made in Harvard. It's very nice. It is impossible to live without failing at something unless you live so cautiously that you might as well have not lived at all. In which case you have failed by default. What a beautiful statement. I read it again and again. So J.K. Rowling went through a share of failures. Amitabh Bachchan, you should read Wikipedia page on Amitabh Bachchan. The kind of mental imbalance he went through, and uncertainty, stress, psychological counseling he needed. After all his ABCL went into losses. He was bankrupt at one point of time. But he's very grounded. I know some people who have worked with him, they say he's very respectful. Life has taught him very harsh lessons. And there are many examples. J.R.D. Tata is another example. Such a big, the icons of Indian industry. I read that book. J.R.D. Tata is such an exemplary person. From 14 companies, at the age of 33, he was owning the whole Tata empire. Then he bought it to 95 companies. And in 1953, Jawaharlal Nehru, without informing him, he nationalized, made it Air India. Tata Airlines became Air India. He was so devastated without even consulting him, without taking him into confidence. But he took it in a positive stride. He was always positive. And 25 years later, when Morarji Desai became the PM, he was removed. J.R.D. Tata was removed as the chairman of Air India, and without informing him, his 4-rank junior called him up and said, "Sir, from tomorrow I am the boss." What a way to treat a man like J.R.D. It's a big insult. But it's not easy, but he took it positively. And the next day was in a flight, and the air hostess, she dropped some juice, and immediately he laughed. He said, "Oh, next time let it be whiskey. It will be better." He had a sense of humor. That's a very beautiful chapter on him. I was very impressed when I read it. He knew how to take failures in his life, in his stride. And our inspiration is Srila Prabhupada. If you read his biography, the 6-volume biography, if you read the first volume, 5 times major business losses in his life. If you read the first volume of his biography, you will think that he is only failure. Only failures, setbacks. Anything I did big, everything was flopping. But he never lost hope. Always fully trusting Krishna. And one day he came home, he had taken 20 years to write Bhagavad Gita commentary. 20 years. Verse to verse. And that time they didn't have soft copies, Xerox copy. He had only one original manuscript, which took him 20 years to write. It was called Gitopanishad. And he was desperate for a financier to publish it. And then he got one Dr. Alagappa from South, who was one of Birla of South. So one of his close friends, Muthu Swami Chetty, arranged a meeting, and then he got a financier. He was so happy that my book is going to get published. So after 20 years of hard work, he comes home excited, and he opens the cupboard and he finds his manuscript missing. He's shocked. He asks his wife. She says, "I don't know." Then he asks his servants. He goes frantically, he spends the whole day searching for that manuscript, because this was his dream for the last 20 years. Devastated. And what do we do the next morning? He starts writing the commentary again from chapter 1, verse 1. What spirit? Because he knew deeply, because of studying Bhagavatam and practicing Krishna consciousness, that this misery is universal. Secondly, there is a purpose, there is a reason, there is an intention behind everything. So there is some cause for this, there is some reason for this has happened. That is very important. And third, he had an aspiration. He had a purpose to live for, which is our next subject matter. And he could go on. So let us move on in life knowing that Lord has arranged a unique coat of purification for all of us. And let us wear this coat. We can't avoid this coat. This coat is given to you. You have to wear it. You may not like it, and you may change it, but you have to wear a coat of suffering, purification. One American president, Calvin Coolidge, when he became the president, everybody said, now America will improve, now poverty will go away, unemployment will go away. He was considered as the Messiah. And within 2 years of presidency, his son died of a fever. And he was so devastated that he lost all interest. And within the next 3 years, he died. And he said, with my son's dying, I lost all interest in being a president of the country. He just couldn't handle that failure. And in Srimad Bhagavatam, we are given such excellent examples of suffering. We have Hiranyakashipu, who had a saintly son. And he was miserable because he wanted an evil tyrant as his son. And we have King Anga, who got an evil son, Vena. And Vena was a small boy, he would kill other children during play. And Anga was miserable because he wanted a saintly son. Anga and Hiranyakashipu would have been so happy to exchange. But that's how the nature. And Chitraketu Maharaj, Bhagavatam says he had no child. He married 1 crore wives. He became a crorepati. But still no child. So Chitraketu Maharaj, no child, miserable. Anga, saintly son, he had a evil demoniac son, Vena, miserable. And Hiranyakashipu, saintly son, miserable. So material energy is not our servant. She's not our order, we can't order her and supply this, supply that. So let us face suffering with grace. These are the 3 points we have taken. And now I'll go a little fast. This is very important. What is the next one? Taking responsibility for our life. Means if you are going through suffering, if you are going through setbacks, please don't hate others, because that's not going to help you. Let's take responsibility for what has happened in our lives. William Shakespeare writes so beautifully, we make guilty of our disasters the sun, the moon and the stars, as if we were villains by necessity, fools by heavenly compulsion. Baby, I saw this incident, one young girl here, I think she was 1.5 years old and something. She fell from the table. The children were playing. And she was crying inconsolably. So to pacify her, everybody was mollycoddling the child, And so in that attempt to pacify the child, they were beating the table. अरे हमारे हीर को परेशान किया, मारो टेबल को मारो. So then eventually the child was pacified and all that drama happened, and then we got busy with the talking other things. But that 10 minutes of that thing, it set me thinking. My friend was there with me, Manish Prabhu. He told me, Prabhuji, do you realize what has happened just now? They have started programming the child to not take responsibility for her life. I said, Bare Bapre, itna bada cheez to maine socha nahi. I thought it was harmless. He said, no, Prabhuji, just see. The child fell from the table and immediately how they pacified her? A ground ne mara, ground ko mara, table ko mara. That means tu miserable hai, the table is responsible. Tu miserable hai, ground is responsible. So uska brainwashing chalu ho gaya. So when she grows up, Manish is telling me this, when she grows up, whole life she'll be looking for a table to hit. इसने मेरे को रुलाया, इसने मेरे को तकलीफ दिया. For taking responsibility for our life means understanding that, others are not responsible. And Bhagavatam teaches us this. We have the story of Parikshit Maharaj facing Kali. It's a long story. Kali came and he was attacking Mother Earth. So then, there is actually Dharma and Earth. They are having a conversation, bull and cow. So cow's 3 legs, bull's legs are broken. And mother cow is asking, cow is being asked. She refuses to blame anyone. So that purport, Prabhupada writes a very beautiful purport there. That, I don't remember the exact words, but something to the effect that only when we stop playing the blame game, that's when we actually experience God in our life. And we have many examples like this. And we have the case of Ambarish Maharaj being cursed by Durvas Muni. Durvas Muni wrongly curses Ambarish Maharaj, but he refuses to blame him. I saw in my own life in the ashram, we had one management meeting some years ago. And sometimes meetings, they get intense. It shouldn't happen like that, but it happens. And one of the members in the meeting shouted, and they were shouting back. And the chairman of the meeting, he was very cool, very peaceful. I was very impressed by his cool demeanor. And one member got up so much angry, he thumped the table and he looked at him and said, you guys are a bunch of eunuchs, good for nothing. And I was a new secretary and I was shocked by what he said. And the chairman was so cool, he said, okay, now that you are questioning our gender, we'll have to do really something very specific. And he made a joke out of it, and everything was just push ho gaya. And I said, wow. And then that person who said that, he apologized. He realized what he had done. He emotional ho gaya tha. He said, sorry, I got just carried away. Please forgive me. I said, no problem. And then after the meeting, I told him, Prabhuji, how were you so cool? He just said something so bad. And then immediately, this Prabhuji said, no, I was cool because I see him as a child. Just like a parent, when the child gets cranky, you know she is disturbed. So I know he is disturbed. Because when people hurl abuses at you, they despise you, they hate you, it's a reflection of their own insecurity. Because what people do to you is not because of who you are, because of what they are. This is how the Prabhuji trained me in my service as a secretary. And you will see if people have there's a saying in America, if Bob has a problem with everyone, then Bob is the problem. So often, we have problems. We have people who get upset with us, who hurt us, but that's not because you are bad. If a relationship breaks, people think, oh, I'm inadequate, I'm not good. No, we have to move on in life because this blame game is not going to help us in any way. And we always are centered. We need to take responsibility for our lives, not just keep thinking about, I'll tell you a classic example. Today is a cricket match between India and England. And there are many Indians who want India to lose. And all Pakistanis want India to win. And when I saw, as a young boy, I saw once a match in Pune. Kenya was playing West Indies. World Cup match. And the whole stadium was shouting, Pakistan, hi, hi. I said, Arey, Pakistan kidhar hai? West Indies is playing Kenya. Our happiness is dependent on somebody else's. I know many Indians will say, India nahi jita World Cup chalega. Wo Pakistan nahi aana chahiye. It's crazy actually. And I know many Pakistanis who are very nice people. Bangladesh, so many Muslims, but Bangladesh has highest number of ISKCON devotees. Out of 1 lakh initiated devotees in ISKCON, we have 50,000 are disciples of His Holiness Jayapataka Swami Maharaj, out of which 30,000 are in Bangladesh. That means 30% of ISKCON's initiated devotees are in Bangladesh. And when we have Rath Yatra in Dhaka, in Bangladesh, we have 25 Rath Yatras on the day of Rath Yatra in Puri, which is going to happen in a few days. And 3 lakh people come for Rath Yatra in Dhaka. All Muslims come, they dance, they chant. I have WhatsApp videos of Rath Yatra in Karachi also, Lahore. So devotees are there, people are nice. Even in Pakistan, families have their problems. Their daughters are not getting married, they have EMIs, they have anxiety, family problem. कितना मिजरी है उधर भी. तो उनका हारने से हमको क्या खुशी मिलेगा? So anyway, let's take responsibility for our lives, not worry about what others are doing. And most important, if you want to practice acceptance in your life, then we need to become trustworthy. We need to become trustworthy and also trust others. In one cricket match, many years ago, I don't remember the names of the players, one fellow dropped a catch and his coach removed him from the next match, his captain. So the coach and the manager got upset with the captain, and the captain explained that he is a great player. I didn't remove him because he dropped a simple catch. I removed him because of his attitude, because he kept saying that it is not my fault, the sunlight was on my eyes, and I just... See, when you don't become trustworthy, and when you keep giving excuses, that attitude is what puts people off. So first I need to become trustworthy. And then I also need to trust others. You may say, but people are all cheaters. See, I agree, we have to have agreements, we have to be smart, we have to be alert, but somewhere deep within we need to have the foundation of understanding that we need to have an abundance mentality. People are good. We need to have faith in the goodness of human beings. And if we become trustworthy and if we also trust others, then it's possible that we'll be able to... Srila Prabhupada, if you see, he trusted his devotees, his disciples. He gave them projects and independence, and he encouraged them to do amazing things. So if you want to practice, if you want to live a life of acceptance and you want to become trusted by everyone, then one magic formula you can practice is a formula called loyal to the absent. The biggest reason why we don't become trustworthy is when two people are talking about a third person, we generally gossip. But loyal to the absent means whenever you're talking about a third person, remember that person is there right now. So what you're going to speak now, would you speak if that person was there? If yes, then you can speak now. Even criticizing somebody is not bad behind his back, if you can say that in front of him also. And when you are loyal to the absent, you will see that initially the people, they may feel upset with you. You are not taking part in this juicy gossip, you are not criticizing. But later on, they will trust you because they know that you will not talk about them also behind their back. And this is the best way to win trust. And unfortunately, even in a devotee community, this can happen. We can become victims of gossip. So we need to be loyal to the absent. So I would like to today only take these 3 principles and stop here and take 5 minutes of questions, and then we can have prasadam. So what we will do next time, we will take appreciation and humility, and then cover aspiration. Remember, there are how many topics? 3. Okay, I'm just putting up all the slides. Yeah. So responsibility we covered. Appreciation and humility we will cover next time. And then the last topic, which is aspiration. And aspiration, so basically so far we have done like this. So for aspiration we have 6 tools also, which we will discuss next time. So for awareness we have discussed 6 principles: knowledge, mindfulness, pause, habits, challenges and spirituality. For acceptance we have discussed authenticity, skills, how to face suffering and responsibility. Now the next part 3 of this would be on August 17th and 18th. And we also have we're going to start a new WhatsApp broadcast group from next week. And if you want daily articles, you can give me your name and number. Some of you are already receiving the articles. So I'll be happy to serve you like this. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
RG Media YouTube channel. Like, share, subscribe.